Good afternoon. This is the Ask Nancy live stream. I'm Nancy Berger, welcoming anyone who is listening, whether live or you're listening to the replay. Welcome. I do this live stream once a month, and I invite cool people to talk about cool stuff. Today, I've invited my friend Paul Crick, who is a fellow Marshall Goldsmith certified coach. That's how I met him in that community, although Paul's skills and talents expand way beyond that. And I listened to Paul. You probably know this, Paul. I told you already. I heard you on a podcast with the Marshall Goldsmith group, and was fascinated by the discussion. Paul is a very accomplished and skilled consultant, coach, facilitator, teacher, educator. And he was talking about the intersection of martial arts, music, and the work that he does. And so I was completely enwrapped by it. And I said, I have to get this guy in my live stream. So welcome, Paul Crick, founder and messy human, probably one of my favorite titles. Paul is the founder of the Elevate Limited Partnership, which is his work life. But Paul, tell us a little bit more about what you do and who you do it for.
I help individuals and teams work together better. There's a tremendous financial cost of not doing that. There's also a personal cost sometimes at an individual level. But for teams, I help them overcome the challenges of misalignment, miscommunication, and unresolved conflict. For a 150-person business, that can amount to almost $300,000 a year, and that's money that you don't want to be wasting. Depending on the benchmarks you use, that number can go up to $4.1 million a year. You won't always get all of that back, but if you could get 10% of it back, you'd want to do that. For individuals,
and that's what you can measure.
You can, to a degree. I think you can do it through time and motion. Most people don't do time and motion studies right now. Most people intuitively know there's less errors, there's less reworks. You see it in things like bringing sales cycles forwards. So instead of slipping a month, they're happening when they should. You see relationships building quicker. You see large projects that go well, so they tend to go on time and to budget more often than not, though most projects, to anyone who's experienced the project management will know, don't rarely follow a true course of that's set out by the plan. We do our best, but things come from left field to sort of mess things up. The question is, can you anticipate it and can you mitigate it? For individuals, I work with strong, accomplished women who are deeply unhappy and with their work.
Is there a line outside your home that spans the neighborhood?
No. It tends to be in tech and consultancy, where it's just I spent most of my life in. I have a reasonably intimate knowledge of what that world looks like, both the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I have seen what it has done to people, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's an opportunity for those women who are strong, accomplished, and have reached a senior level to say, well, now what? What's on the other side of that? Right. I've reached a place where my work doesn't feel meaningful anymore, and my professional life's a bit in chaos. And then because of the way work is set up against women, I've got care duties on both sides. I've still got children coming up to college age that I need to look for. I'm starting to look after my parents as they age, and I'm starting to experience symptoms of perimenopause, menopause, and that just creates a perfect storm that we don't cater to right now.
Right.
And so people will say to me, "Oh, is that a career planning service?" And the answer is, it's not. It's really about how do you want to reset your relationship with the work that you do? How do you choose work that lights you up?
So let me ask you a question on that. It's a great segue to this question. Do you believe that relationship building encompasses also changing relationship with self.
I think it's interesting. We could talk about the self for forever and a day. I think the shortcut for me is self is a story we tell about ourselves,
Right.
and that story can shift. And the story we tell ourselves usually varies slightly from context to context. If I'm in a work setting, I'll tell one story. If I'm with a group of friends, I'll tell another. If I'm on the mat in the dojo, I'll tell something. They're broadly similar, but the stuff around the edges changes. And the question then becomes, well, what's the story you really want to write? Society, if you'll let it, particularly Western society, will try and shape a story for you to fit in. As the saying goes, we want you in a box. What's the box we want to put you in? It's about what box do you want to, what story you want to write for yourself, and what's the box? What's the label for that box that you want for you, that you've chosen on your terms? That's what matters. And
yes, and if we write a story, we believe the story, and then we behave based on that story, it will alter our relationship with our work, our relationship with other people, our relationship with ourselves. So within the context of the spaces between us, which is what we called this session today, what you do, what I'm hearing is you offer guidance to get clarity around that and to make those connections meaningful and smooth and flowing. So in your experience, tell me, what are some, if you had to name like a couple of major things that are recurring issues that you kind of deal with in your practice, what would you say they would be? A couple of them.
People worried about other people's opinion of them. I think that's the first thing. And then trust. I think trust is a big, trust is probably the key to everything. Most people would say that. You read people like Patrick Lencioni and other people in that, Marshall in that space. It's about trust and cultivating that trust. And how do you do the thing that says, all right, I'll go first. I'll do some small step that moves us forward in terms of learning that you can trust me, or I can trust you.
Yeah, and that old adage, trust comes in by foot and leaves on horseback.
It certainly does, and it's all about the extent of giving someone else control over a piece of information about you that once you've given it to them, you no longer have control over. You're actually quite vulnerable, which is one of my favorite definitions of trust. And I think it's tough to do, but there's qualities of trust. There's trust of others, but there's also, when I think about coaching strong, accomplished women, there's also self-trust.
Yes.
There's coming into that realization of being grounded enough to have an unshakable sense of, these are my values, these are my non-negotiables.
Yep.
And I trust that I can stand in the fire. To quote a poem, I can betray others without betraying myself. I have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes in life we have to do that in order to retain a sense of who we are and our connectedness to who we are. Because if we don't, then chaos enters our life in a way that we feel blown by the four winds and have no ability to get hold of it, and therefore we're exhausted and we're washed out
and
that turns into serious mental health problems.
Serious mental, yes. So when you're working with a client like this, what are some of the things that you focus on to try to cultivate that trust or to create it?
I'm going to say something that sounds like I'm speaking to a 10-year-old, and it's not really my intention. It's shorthand.
Bring it, Paul. Bring it.
There are 4 steps that we have to do, all of us, which is wake up, clean up, grow up, and show up. And we all have a foot in each of those buckets, always. There's always something we got to wake up to that we weren't aware of. There's always some inner work to be done. about something because something somewhere has continues to trigger us, or we think we've worked with it, and then all of a sudden we come across a situation, we kind of go, oh crap, not that again. And then we've got to grow up, which is, we've got to leave behind some of the we've got to make room for the things that are important in our lives. For me, it was, if you'd said to me I'd stop drinking and I'd stop watching TV 10 years ago, I would have laughed. But those are some of the it's little steps of growing up. And I'm not trying to be righteous Joe here. It's what are the things you need to let go of in order to grow into the person you need to become, you want to become, because there is a sacrifice. There is some kind of payment that needs to be made in dues for that to happen, and that can be simple. It can be, I'm gonna turn all my electronics off at 8:30, and I'm going to read for half an hour before I go to bed.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And the thing is, it's not prescriptive. It's not, oh, well, it's not like these programs though. Here's 7 steps to do this. And you do these 7, or here's the 7 steps I did, so follow my steps. Nothing wrong in those programs. They're a good start. But what we really want to do is to reach inside to the individual and the individuals in a collective and say, what do you want to do? It's your destiny. It's your story. What do you want to do? What are the non-negotiables?
I know, but people, but largely I find in my work that a lot of times that's a difficult question for people.
I think that's it. And that's what people underestimate. And it's why what I do isn't a career service. We're really talking about transformative and generative change, which is how do I become someone different? How do I become it's kind of corny. It's how do I become the next best version of me? You've got to want it, and then you've got to understand that it takes consistent application, because actually it's really, really, really hard to do. The research says on average it takes 66 days for one behavior change to take root, and then another 3 to 6 weeks for someone else to actually notice it. That's a heck of a long time to do that. Doesn't mean it's not possible, and with the right people around you supporting you and keeping you, fanning your flames when you do it right, and they catch you doing it right, and then holding your feet gently to the fire, going, you're slipping back. Then it's surrounding yourself with sort of changing your environment, and even that's difficult because I always remember when I gave up smoking. I used to be the boss used to swing by my desk and he'd say, should we go for a smoke? And it was kind of like, oh, the boss has asked me to smoke. I'll be visible and I'll do this. And then one day he came by and he said, are you coming? And I said, no. He said, why? I said, I've given up. And there was that pause where the story I told myself was, he thinks I've got 4 heads and I've lost it. But that's what we have to do. We have to walk away from some of our habits and some of the people and set boundaries around things that start
it's
to
so
become
true.
noticeable.
So, oh gosh. So wake up, clean up, grow up, show up. Okay. Yeah. So brilliant. So I specialize in the cleanup section of your methodology. And I want to just dig in on that a little bit, because what you said it all quickly, but it's so resonant that we have to understand ourselves a little bit better. The noticing, it starts with the noticing, right? We just don't, meta is not something we're naturally good at, metacognition and thinking about our thinking, noticing our patterns. And I think with that if you don't do that first, it's very difficult to do the rest. So what are some of the things you do with clients to get them to notice themselves more?
Well, it's really trying to help them understand how they tick. So we'll do a simple exercise of folding your arms. So, the fold your arms and you say, now fold them the other way. And some people struggle with it. Some people have learned how to do it, but it's trying to show people that everything we do is learned and conditioned. From the moment we enter the world, we learn it from other people, or we learn it as a way to sort of cope. We'll shower the same way. We'll go the same. We'll either go bottom to top, top to bottom, or and we'll dry ourselves off in the same way, and we'll go to bed in the same way. I was working with with a lady yesterday, and we mapped it out. We mapped out a little map that said, "This is how. Teach me how to do you." Is usually how I frame it. And by slicing it into milliseconds of time, literal time slices. So what do you do next? What do you say? What do you feel? What do you see? Does that happen at the same time? we start to build a picture of how people do stuff, and then we go, so how do you want to change it?
Mm. Do you get resistance? Do they feel resistant in that process of
Not really.
sharing with you who they are?
I try to make it fun. At the end of the day, you've got to pace and lead, and therefore, if your client's not ready to take the next step, pushing them there won't happen. As anyone with kids will know, you've got to encourage them and get to the point where they want to do it. So I try to use a little light humor to do that. I use examples in my own life where it's like, look, we're all similar. We do similar things. So I'll talk about, there was a point in my life where I was a shopaholic, where literally my strategy was go online, see it, buy it. It because there's one click buy. It was easy, see it, buy it, and that was it. It was in my trolley and gone. But that was filling a gap in my life. I was feeling discomfort and I wasn't really aware of it. And I had to change that. So the strategy became see it, ask a question. Do I need it? If the answer was yes, put it on your wish list. Go back 2 days later. Do I still need it? 9 times out of 10, the answer was no.
Yeah.
It was just that awareness. And sometimes it can be really, really small. It can be one tiny difference that makes all the difference.
Yes. And there's always the splash effect, right? It starts here and then it expands out and then, And when we're talking about trust, I want to just circle back to music for a minute, because, you've played with other musicians. I've played, I've been in bands for, 25 years. That there's an inherent trust there that maybe as musicians we're just more used to that vulnerability. When you walk into a new ensemble or a new band and you're doing something, and they say, okay, you take this solo, or you take this thing, or you do this, and it all kind of gels with the right people. And don't you feel that's a little bit of an overlap, with music?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. That's why I love music as an analogy. People will talk about a team as something that's static. They'll show you an organogram on a piece of paper and you go, there's my team. And you go, no, it's not. That isn't a team. The team isn't, because there are things that aren't present on that piece of paper that exist in a room for a group of musicians to play. There's the room itself for a start. There's the echoes. Sometimes there's an audience. The role the audience plays, the energy that's given back when musicians play.
Oh my gosh, it's palpable, but we can't really describe it yet.
It's an amazing. I remember the first gig I ever played as a teenager, and I was just like blown away by that feeling when you get back in the dressing room. You go, what was that?
Yeah,
it's higher than any high I've ever had, for sure.
Absolutely,
it's amazing. So yes, there are tremendous parallels. Music again, notes on a page, dots that are static, but until we play them and they start to move in the air and move air, then it doesn't become music. And actually, several composers have said music isn't the dots on the page, it's the spaces in between the notes. So you can what's interesting is in MIDI, when you're programming in a computer, you can be really precise about how you set that to right down to the millisecond. And you can mess with bits of music to give it that, you can give it that Oscar Peterson swing. You can give it the
music production is, it's a whole
Dr. John swing, and you kind of go, that's their sound, that's their rhythm, that's how they write their story. And their ability, you watch guitarists, you watch someone like Gary Moore versus, I don't know, Joe Satriani, and two incredibly accomplished players, but both with a very different voice and on how they make their instruments vibrate air. It's quite incredible.
That space in between the notes, space in between musicians, spaces. I use this analogy in my keynote speech about changing our thought processes. You're a martial artist. I believe you study Aikido, or?
Yes, it's Aikido.
So I studied Taekwondo. So I remember when I was taking my black belt test, preparing for it, my instructor, I had to break wood, and I was really scared about it. And my instructor said, you're focusing on breaking the wood. That's your problem. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, I want you to focus on the space behind the wood and put your foot there.
Yes.
And I blew through the 3 inches, no problem. Just that concept. So it's like space is kind of an interesting.
I think it's essential because the thing about Aikido is it's unlike Taekwondo, it's not a striking art. It's a way of using the energy that the other person presents to you to restore harmony. And that's what makes it so hard. How you place your body, how you meet that person, how you accommodate their physiology, their energy, their intent dictates how you respond. And yet really the only so you're looking at time, distance, and speed all the time. You're literally waiting. The longer you wait, the better it is, because your training partner, the more they are committed, they can't uncommit. But in a work environment, you can use that energy. Someone's pushing against you, literally saying your idea is stupid. You can have an argument that says, no, your idea is stupid. And then you just get locked in this, you're stupid, I'm stupid, that thing, and nothing changes because what we resist persists. But if we're willing to take the energy of your idea is stupid and say, okay, so tell me why my idea is stupid.
Tell me why. Curiosity.
That's inviting the energy that's coming towards you and going, okay, I'll accept that. I'll take that with me, and I'll use that to be curious, to maybe learn something, to maybe as appears in Deep Democracy, the idea that actually there is wisdom in a no. And it's just, unless we explore it, we miss it.
Yes, but we can get in our own way on that.
Oh, always.
You were referencing triggers. If we get triggered, then our logical brain shuts down. We're back in the amygdala. We're trauma responding. It's just, it's science, it's biology. It's not my opinion. So that's where the cleanup has to come in before you can, really even be present to somebody else's energy or the curiosity in their your idea is stupid,
I think that's true, and we ignore this in the workplace. We ignore the fact that we have a biology that has worked very, very efficiently for 40, 50,000 years, keeping us safe from being attacked by all sorts of things. But that process, that biology still works the same way, and we make the assessment. And whilst we're not fending off saber-toothed tigers, we are looking at things going, am I safe? Am I accepted? Because the science is true. The pain center for physical pain is the same as emotional pain, where we receive rejection when we are rejected. And therefore that's uncomfortable when we're excommunicated. There's a reason babies die when they don't have contact with their mother. And we learn that from our caregivers. I've just written a piece on the reason we need to start looking at attachment theory in the workplace is because whilst it occurs in infant years, it lasts all the way through our entire life. And unless we become aware of how we respond based on because our response is subjective. Unless we're aware of that, we will always respond the same way. And you can depotentiate, you can remove the emotional charge from the amygdala, so that it doesn't trigger. Or if it does trigger, you go, oh, I'm triggered. Oh, okay, I know I'm triggered now. Good.
Right, you notice.
I'm going to choose a different response.
I'm going to choose a different response. Say it again, Paul. I'm going to choose a different response. Yes.
Yeah, that sounds really, really easy, and it's not.
No, it's not.
Because a lot of it is automated in our conditioning. When you do the work,
practice it.
You can. That's the beauty of martial arts, is you face up against something that is triggering. If someone's coming at you and they're going to kick you, hit you, smash you with a sword, then someone's saying to you, and now what I need you to do is I need you to wait until the last minute. You go, I beg your pardon.
I know. Say that again.
Say that again. I've gone.
Yes, it's so true. And I think if we can get this notion into the organizational ethos, everything we do is a choice. Now, if we can figure out why we're choosing that way, we can shift it,
Yes.
pivot, reframe, but we have to figure out why we choose that way. And it changes people's work relationships. It changes people's lives.
It does, because you have something as simple commit. You mean I don't have to do this anymore? It's like, no, you
Right.
don't. What would you like to do instead? Wow.
Wow.
And that becomes hugely powerful, huge drives to satisfy needs that people thought they had because of something they were told in earlier years, not necessarily their early years, but earlier in their career. It's kind of like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. You can choose whatever you want right now. You just need people around you to support you through that. When you're learning something difficult like a fall in martial arts, doing that for the first time, when you're watching the black belts training and they're throwing each other and it's really fast and it's powerful, you think, oh my God, I'll never be able to do that.
Right.
But when you have people around you that take you step by step down that path, eventually when you are thrown for the first time and discover the difference between being thrown to the mat versus being thrown through the mat,
Right.
then and you enjoy it, then you go, wow, that's fantastic. And I can trust my body to do what it needs to do, so that much like a roller coaster, I can enjoy the ride.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I guess it's an Einstein quote. I just love this quote. You can't solve a problem with the same brain that created the problem, right?
That is well used, and it is true.
It is true. So, I have a choice how I look at this problem, how I look at this connection, this relationship, this whatever it is, I can choose differently. To your point, it's not easy, but with consistent practice, and you and I get the strong feeling that you did it for yourself. I know I've done it for myself in my life. It just takes time, and it takes commitment, commitment.
You have to keep doing it.
You have to keep doing it. But the one of the strongest, the most powerful things for people to realize is that they've always had the power to do it. It's not that this great skill that they don't have or they have to acquire. They just have to sort of uncover it, dust it off. Oh, neuroplasticity. I can change my brain. I can rewire and reframe my thought processes.
I like to use the image of a bird in a cage. Essentially, we're all birds in the cage. We don't necessarily realize the door is open and we can leave the cage.
I love that. I love that. That's a stronger visual for sure. Okay, Paul, we have a few minutes, but before I want to make sure everyone knows how to get in touch with you. And do you work with clients in the US?
I work all over the world. I'm very lucky. Yes, I'm based in the UK. But because we're so used to working on Zoom, certainly one-to-one works well that way. But group also works that way too.
Okay, so how do people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Find me on LinkedIn is the easiest way. Send me a DM. Just look me up, tap me up for a coffee or a chat, whatever you'd like to do. If you'd like to take a look at the website, it's theelevatepartnership.com. And I have a Substack, so that's my blog, which is called the Pocket Dojo. And the Pocket Dojo is a place where we try and help people think about things that in different ways and things that they don't necessarily ordinarily think about. We try hard.
Pocket Dojo, I love that. I've seen your Substack. It's a great way to frame the stuff that we were talking about here within that context. Like, think differently about the way you think. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of why I was drawn to your conversation with Brandon Murgard on the Marshall Goldsmith podcast. But okay, so in closing, well, first of all, before we came on, we have 1 minute. You were talking about Ebony Buckle. Is that a band that you just discovered?
Yeah. So a friend of mine. The problem is I turned 60 this year, and the problem is you stay musically in your teens.
Yes.
And I try hard to. I try. It's like, no, I need to stop listening to Led Zeppelin and listen to some new stuff. So a friend of mine runs a rock show on a community radio station here in the UK, and he's always posting stuff because he gets all the local bands he features them. He puts them on. And he came across an artist called Ebony Buckle.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll go listen to it. And I just went, oh wow, that's great. that's a fantastic voice.
Okay, give me a genre. Is it what?
It's, oh gosh. Well, he would put it in progressive rock.
Okay.
But the thing I love about progressive rock is, yeah, you give it that label that gets
Yeah.
you through the door, but actually when
Yeah.
you listen to it, it's like, it's not, you'll hear traces of things and influences, but it's her own stuff, which is why it's a wow.
Okay, I'm plugging into Spotify when we close. Paul Crick, thank you so much for joining me
Oh,
today.
Nancy, thank you.
Check Paul out and his website, the Elevate Partnership. Until next month, thanks for joining me on Ask Nancy. I'll see you next time. Take good care.